बुक बडीज, आपने जो मोटरवे के ऊपर शर्मनाक रेप इंसिडेंट हुआ है उसके बारे में तो अब तक सुन ही लिया होगा। ये पूरी कौम के लिए इतना तकलीफ दे इंसिडेंट है, स्पेशली फॉर वुमेन, इतना डेविस्टेटिंग है कि उनकी ओवरऑल सिक्योरिटी के ऊपर एक बहुत बड़ा सवालिया निशान आ गया है। और ऊपर से टू पुट सॉल्ट ऑन द वुंड्स, जो लाहौर पुलिस के चीफ हैं, जो सीसीपी हैं, उनका जो बयान आया है उससे उनकी सोच की अक्कासी होती है कि कितनी धक्यानुसी है, जिसमें वो विक्टिम को ब्लेम कर रहे हैं, जिसके साथ रेप हुआ है उसको ब्लेम कर रहे हैं कि भाई वो ही जिम्मेदार है अपने साथ ज्यादती का। मैं अक्सर सोचता हूं कि मुल्क में अजीबो गरीब हालात चल रहे हैं। हर दूसरे दिन कोई ना कोई रेप इंसिडेंट आ जाता है, कभी किसी खातून के साथ रेप, कभी किसी बच्ची के साथ रेप, जिसको पीडोफीलिया कहते हैं। और हमारी ये हालत हो गई है कि हम कब्रों से मुर्दों को निकाल के उनके साथ भी ज्यादती कर देते हैं। इसी हवाले से कुछ दिनों पहले मैंने एक इंडियन ऑथर तारा कौशल की किताब व्हाई मेन रेप पढ़ी, जो बहुत ही खूबसूरत तरीके से उन लोगों की मेंटालिटी और साइकोलॉजी को समझती है जो रेप कमिट करते हैं, जो औरतों के साथ ज्यादती करते हैं। तो मैंने सोचा क्यों ना आज के वीडियो में मैं खुद तारा को इनवाइट करूं और उनके साथ बैठ के डिटेल में उनकी इस किताब को डिस्कस करूं। बहुत ही एक्सटेंसिव रिसर्च के बाद किताब लिखी गई है और कुछ ऐसे पहलुओं का जिक्र है जो हमने पहले कभी नहीं सुने। फॉर एग्जाम्पल, पोर्नोग्राफी का क्या ताल्लुक है रेप से, इसी तरह इंसान की एजुकेशन का क्या ताल्लुक है रेपिस्ट की मेंटालिटी से, इसी तरह बॉलीवुड का क्या ताल्लुक है रेप से। सो आज इन सब मौजूद के ऊपर बात करते हैं। सो इमीडिएटली पढ़ते हैं अपनी डिस्कशन की जानिब।
Hello Tara, good afternoon. How are you?
Hi, very well. Thank you. How are you, Shahrukh?
I'm doing good. How have you been and how have you spent your time in the pandemic so far?
I have launched a book in the pandemic.
Okay.
I have, and then I've right after battled serious depression in the pandemic, and I'm writing my second book. So it's been a bit of an intense
Okay.
experience.
So will you let the cat out of the bag? What's the title of your next book, or you still want to conceal it?
The title of my next book is actually, I don't think it's yet been declared. I mean, I know what it is, but I don't think I can talk about it yet.
Okay.
But it is about, it's a narrative non-fiction book.
Okay.
About the case of a rape and murder that happened in Agra,
Okay.
in UP, in India.
Okay. Okay. Okay, great.
But you obviously, so it is related to my first book, but it's different. It's a different book entirely.
So let's cut it to the chase, Tara.
Mhm.
First of all, I want to in fact congratulate you for writing such an exhaustive piece of research and penning it down. And in fact, it's a very gutsy work that you have done, that you have written on such a stigmatized and such a taboo topic. So I'll ask you a very cliched question that you must have been asked a million times, and I would like to repeat that question to you. That, like I said, it's a stigmatized topic, but how come you got the courage, and what was the motivation behind writing on rape?
So stigmatized is correct, and thank you very much for your very profuse praise, Shahrukh.
It's from my heart of heart, so there's no fluff. It comes from my heart of heart.
Thank you. So Shahrukh, I was raped by my gardener when I was 4 or 5 years old.
Yeah.
But
you mentioned that in the book as well.
Yes, all of this is in the book. I have no shame. I believe that, as my book has come to say, that, you know, we situate the blame for all of these things on the wrong person. But anyway, I'll come to all of that and that exploration. Let me answer your question. So I was raped by my gardener when I was 4 or 5 years old. But because my parents didn't know, nothing changed in my life.
Okay.
You know, there was no restriction on my freedoms or anything. But when I was 12, my parents moved from, my father was in the Indian Navy. So they moved from very safe spaces, which are like naval bases, or at least what people imagine are safe spaces, to Delhi, to Noida in UP, which is a lot less safe. And we were civilians now, so we were in the public space. And suddenly my parents were very concerned about my hemlines and my deadlines and kahan ja rahi ho, kya kar rahi ho, you know, where. And I would be flashed at in school. I nearly got abducted and gang raped. And obviously, I mean, that was 25 years ago. I'm 37 now, but I think this book is a result of the question that I started asking then as a baby feminist. Ki, why are the actions of men impacting my life and my freedoms? And why are they, mujhe kyun rok rahe ho? Unko bolo ki wo roke. Why can't they stop? Why do I have to change my life? But this is the reality. And then the Delhi gang rape happened, and I don't know how familiar you are with this.
You're talking about the Nirbhaya case in 2012?
Yes, the Nirbhaya incident.
Yeah.
Of 2020. So the Delhi gang rape happened in December 2012. And at that point, I was like, okay, so I was affected like the whole country, but also I used to be a student who traveled to Delhi University by bus 10 years ago, 10 years before that. So I was like, ek to kuch bhi nahi badla. And I was also deeply affected. So then I was like, look, it's time. It's time to change the discourse, to put the onus back where it belongs. And I say this a lot in the book, Shahrukh, that it's not like I am a researcher, I'm a writer.
Yeah.
I am a writer. So I have taken the discourse that is very nuanced in academia. You know, in academia, they are talking about, you know, the causes of rape as being with the man and the perpetrator and not the victim. But we are still talking about, you know, wo kahan ja rahi thi, kya kar rahi thi, and clearly your police chief has also said, whatever that gentleman in your...
Absolutely.
Pardon?
It's very unfortunate. In fact, while you were talking, I was just reminiscing what he said. That instead of putting the blame on the person who's the predator and finding him out, he's putting the entire blame on the victim.
Yes.
And you refer to that in your book as well. I've gone through that, where there is a lot of victim shaming. So in fact, the victim becomes the predator.
Yeah, and even now, I mean, even what's happened in Lahore right now, your motorway incident, who was it? Somebody has said, ki, you know, in our society, daughters and mothers and sisters should not be on the road. But why shouldn't they be on the road? Because of men. So
Absolutely.
Why should our lives be curtailed because of the actions of men? And I think this is the reason I wrote my book. That, you know, it's time to put the onus back where it belongs.
So Tara, I just for the purpose of helping the people over here in Pakistan as well, because, you know, the youth is suffering a lot from depression, and since the time of social media, these cases are more brought into the limelight. And I've come across a lot of ladies who were sexually harassed in their childhood. So you have suffered, you have gone through that misery and the turmoil at the age of 4. But seemingly, and I'm very happy to see that you look very pretty, very, very balanced, and you have seemingly superficially come out of that mental turmoil that you must have gone through. So can you just enlighten me on the fact that how long did that incident remain with you? How did you develop this mental capacity to come out of the turmoil? Did you do any deliberate exercises, or it just vanished out of your memory?
No, it didn't vanish out of my memory. I'm going to say this one thing, or actually lots of things to say on this. But so a lot of people look at gender violence and say, okay, I'm going to constantly be victimized by it, or see myself as a victim.
Yeah.
Or as a survivor, someone who has gotten over it, or as a thriver. And I do see myself as a thriver. I mean, you can use whatever word. I've taken a negative experience, and I hope to not one negative experience, I've had a lot of them, but I hope to change the world and make a difference. And if life gives you lemons, I've made lemonade, and I'm going to do something. And this is my personal experience that is going to be transformatory, not only for me, but for a lot of women, hopefully. But whoever I've spoken to, whichever kinds of victims I've spoken to, however they see themselves, as I said, victim, survivor, thriver, everyone who has experienced sexual violence sees it as a pivotal experience in their life. That it's going to change the way it is something that changes you elementally. Yeah. Right? Now, the traditional way of looking at why you're upset or challenged by gender violence is to say कि तुम्हारी पूरी कौम की इज्जत, honor तुम्हारे vagina में बसी हुई है. And that's a traditional way of looking at why gender violence is so traumatic. I mean, honor and shame and izzat, all of it is it's all situated in a woman's vagina in South Asian countries. And then some people, one of the other ways of looking at it is to say that, look, it's just one part of your body that got hurt. किसी ने तुम्हारा हाथ काट दिया या थप्पड़ मार दिया. What's the difference between that and being violated sexually? It's so what? It's a body part. But I think the third way of looking at it, which is that I think rape is very traumatic, but not for the reasons that traditionalists look at it. They say it's traumatic because your honor and your whatever is that and all of those things. I don't see it like that. I see it as traumatic because if you situate individual rights and if you situate sexual autonomy and individual rights in every human being in the planet, which I do, then rape is a violation of your individual rights and sexual autonomy. And so it is traumatic. It was something that was done to me that is out of my control, that I did not choose. So it is very traumatic.
I think, Tara, what you said is quite right and appropriate because, that's why I respect you more because you have taken that baby step whereby you have come out and you have said that this is what has happened with you in your childhood. And you've come out against it and you have written on men's psychology as to what are the reasons behind committing a particular incident. But what you just alluded to, हमारी society भी जो पाकिस्तान की है, I think it's quite similar to the Indian society in terms of the socio-economic and cultural values that we have, especially in the rural areas. Urban areas में still, अगर आप किसी साइकोलॉजिस्ट के पास जा रहे हो, किसी साइकियाट्रिस्ट के पास जा रहे हो, तो लोग छुप के जाते हैं. They cannot tell anyone that they are consulting a psychologist or a psychiatrist. Now the problem is, like you said, कि अगर God forbid किसी का रेप हो जाता है, कुछ ज्यादती हो जाती है, तो वो खातून किसी को बता सकती है, especially in Pakistan. And even if she consults a doctor or a psychologist and someone gets to know, तो वो उसके लिए then it's a bigger trouble for her. So it's actually a quagmire in which the victim is stuck. So that's why, Tara, कि आपकी जो effort है ना, मैं चाहता हूँ कि पाकिस्तान में भी आपकी किताब को पढ़ा जाए ताकि थोड़ी सी strength develop हो ख़वातीन में यहाँ पे, so that they are able to come over it and then we get the courage, in fact, कि हमारे माहौल में भी, हमारे environment में भी इस तरह के मौजू के ऊपर, topic के ऊपर गुफ्तगू की जाए. Coming back to your book, what was most interesting was the modus operandi that you adopted. You changed your name, you changed your Facebook ID, you changed everything. So can you just help me go through the process of screening and how did you filter out the people? You actually interviewed 9 people. So I want to know, how did you actually filter them out? What was the sampling method? Because I'm a researcher as well, I'm a PhD scholar. So from a research point of view, in fact, your book is quite good as well. So can you help me go through the entire process? किस तरीके से आपने narrow down किया उन लोगों पे?
Okay. So again, before that, I'm going to establish what you said to me the other day on the phone when we were talking. You said that Pakistani society and Indian society is very similar. I asked you how my book was valid in Pakistan, and you said
on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, I would rate it at 9. In terms of
the only difference you said was that the majority religion that I described as Hindu, you described as Islam. Islam.
Muslims.
And apart from that, there was no difference, was what you said.
Yeah.
So now I'm going to, using that as a parameter, I'm going to tell you what happened. So right before, so my book is, as you've seen, it is a exploration, but I have chosen the framework of social class. And social class, I've defined it as an intersection between education and location and religion. This is a big segue, but I won't go there. But what I wanted to do was see India through a varied lens. And so the first thing I did when I decided that I had to go undercover, and the reason I went undercover is very simple. First of all, most of the men that I interviewed had not been accused. They had not been taken to the police. So can you imagine Shahrukh calling someone and saying, hey, hello, uncle, आपको किसी ने पुलिस में तो बताया नहीं, लेकिन मुझे पता है आप रेपिस्ट हो, आप मुझसे बात करोगे.
Oh my God.
So that the conversation would never happen. But also, you said to me, you're a researcher, you know of what is called the social desirability bias, which is a natural phenomenon where most people will tell others what the other person wants to hear.
Yeah.
Yes. So I didn't want people to, if I told them that I'm a feminist researcher and I'm studying rape in order to stop it, I didn't want them to change their answers to suit me. I also, on the flip side, didn't want them to try and be more dabang and, tell me stories that never happened. So what I pretended to do was I said I was an NRI filmmaker and I was going to research a film.
Okay.
That was my story. So I wanted to know everything about them. And I had a 250 question questionnaire. Essentially, the questions that I asked these men were all similar. The reasons they thought I was asking was for various types of movies. When I met a village guy, I said it was like People Life.
Yeah.
When I met somebody, when I met a political guy, I said, gangs of Wasseypur. That's how I did it. Now, what I ended up doing was, the first thing I did to look for these men was I put up a post. I started talking to people on my Facebook. And I had an idea before I started researching the book. And if you you've read the book, but you realize that it is actually an exploration of my own understanding. I have not come to the subject saying, I know this, I'm telling you. It's how I learned stuff.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, I had this sense, but I wasn't quite sure what it was, that gender violence follows class lines. Now, what I mean to say is that men from the highest social class have access to women of their classes and below.
Yeah.
Right? That's the truth. And so what I found was that women of my social class were raped by men of my social class. And these are the women that are on my Facebook and are talking to me. So if that's the truth, although I didn't want to represent, the Shakti Kapoor idea of rapist, ki koi, dangerous looking monster type janab baithe hue hain, kisi bushes ke piche, and then they're waiting for some virgin girl to walk by or un pe kood jate hain. I didn't want to promote that idea of rapists.
Yeah.
But I did also want to promote but men like this, men from my social class, are also not representative of the whole of India.
Yeah.
So that's why what I ended up doing was I took, out of those 70 women who talked to me initially, I took only 2 names. I researched only 2 of those people. And for the rest, for men from different social classes, I approached detective agencies, I approached the local media, local contacts, women's NGOs, the police, etc. And I finally found my 9 men.
Okay. But how did you get the guts, Tara, to live with them? You stayed with them. You spoke to their families. You interviewed them rigorously. How did you get the guts when you know that this guy who you are staying with, he's a predator? How did you get courage to do that?
Um, you know, people have been asking.
Just to supplement this question, was it something to prove something to your own inner self that, okay, this is what I'm gonna do, I'm going to expose them, or it was for the larger benefit of the community, whereby you said कि मुझे अब ये स्टैंड लेना है और मुझे इन लोगों को बाय हुक और बाय क्रुक एक्सपोज करना है?
तो एक तो एक्सपोज तो हुए नहीं है क्योंकि मैंने उनके रियल नेम तो बताए नहीं
है। उनमें से एक आई गेस हैज बीन अरेस्टेड बाय द पुलिस, आई गेस.
Yes, just one. But the thing is, I have not used their real names because in India, we like our lynch mobs. We are going to look at these men and go, if I had really revealed their names, we would expect them to be, hanged and inki like pant utari jati in. But that's not the point. They are symptoms. I was studying them as symptoms of a larger problem.
Yeah.
So I've not revealed their names. But coming back to your question, a lot of people ask me this, tumhe guts kaise hue? And I look back now and I don't even think I was thinking of it. It was just like, okay, mujhe book karni hai, ye main book likh rahi hu, ab work, I mean, I don't know whether it was also part of being a naval officer's daughter, where, work is work. You're doing it, jo karna hai, wo to karna hi hai. And I don't think there was the space for fear.
Okay.
I was just like, oh, now I'm doing this book. This is the book I'm writing. Book likhne ke liye now I have to interview men and aise karna hai. And I was like, gone. I think it's my spouse who was sitting and watching my WhatsApp, my WhatsApp tracking. And kabhi mera signal, I mean, when I was in rural India, kabhi signal nahi hota tha, and he would start getting panicky. And, he was more concerned. But I was just like, adrenaline hai, ye job hai, main ja rahi hu, bye. And I was also very excited because as an urban Indian girl, I've never seen this kind of India. I met like a dacoit and a gun runner and like, I met a contract killer, and I was like, ye log hote. I was just so fascinated by India because there are so many Indias living in so many centuries at once that there were just Indias that I had not seen.
I think kudos to your husband as well. I don't know his name, but give my regards to him. I think he deserves an applause and appreciation and acknowledgement. Especially this message goes out to the husbands in my country कि आप अपनी बेगम को, अपनी वाइफ को वो लिबर्टी, वो ऑटोनॉमी दें कि वो अपने आप को डिस्कवर कर सके. She should be able to spread her wings. She should be able to identify her purpose in life and her identity, which is of course so sacrosanct and sacred for all of us. तो मसला यही आता है कि I don't know अर्बन इंडिया में क्या है, बट इट्स वेरी अनफॉर्चुनेट इन पाकिस्तान. इवन इन अर्बन एरियाज के खातून ने जब शादी कर ली तो देन शी इज टाइड टू हर हस्बैंड. उसकी कोई और आइडेंटिटी नहीं है, कोई और पर्पस नहीं है, उसके बच्चे हो जाते हैं. मैं हमेशा ये कहता हूँ, मैंने एक वीडियो भी बनाई, उसके ऊपर मुझे काफी बैकलैश आया कि खवातीन को 28 साल के बाद शादी करनी चाहिए. अब उसके पीछे रीजन ये थी कि भाई पहले 28 साल में अपने ऊपर इन्वेस्ट करो, सेल्फ नरिश करो, सेल्फ नर्चर करो, अपना आइडेंटिटी ढूंढो. इफ यू वांट टू वर्क, explore yourself, and then if you want to get married, by the time you reach 28, आप एक excellence पे पहुंच चुके होगे, आपकी जॉब अच्छी होगी, प्रोफेशनल जो भी आपने काम चूज करना है, and then you can get to choose the person you want to marry. यहाँ पे मसला ये है कि 15-16 साल से लड़कियों को प्रेशर दे दिया जाता है कि भाई अब तुम्हारी मंगनी होगी और ये तुम मांग ली गई हो, तो वो लड़की का सारा आइडेंटिटी पर्पस तो that's gone down the drain. Let's jump to the reasons. Number one reason, one of the prime reasons that you have mentioned कि ये rape क्यों होते हैं, is the patriarchy that exists not only very strongly in India, but as well as in Pakistan. Number one is patriarchy, and then you alluded to a very important thing, which people, of course, are fearful of talking about, and that is the penis privilege that men possess. Can you please talk about both the aspects in detail? What do you actually mean? Because मैं चाहता हूं कि इस मीडियम के थ्रू ना आज एक दफा पेट्रियार्की हम लोग समझा दें अवाम को कि पेट्रियार्कल सोसाइटी होती क्या है and what's the penis privilege that men tend to enjoy.
Okay, so let's talk about patriarchy. What is patriarchy? Patriarchy is the idea that there are only two genders. So it doesn't acknowledge any of the scientific and other evidence that there are more genders. But patriarchy is the idea that there are only two genders. And of these two genders, the male is the more important gender. Now, patriarchy has existed across the world for many centuries. And except a few matriarchal societies, of course. But one of the ways that you can look at that is saying that patriarchy there must be something in this idea that men are superior, because otherwise puri dunya mein kyun phailti ye idea. But let's look at the origins of patriarchy. Patriarchy originated in pre-agrarian times. Now, if the genders have differences and say women can give babies and men are more physically strong, if there are differences between the sexes, at that point where we were agrarian, where there were dangerous predators at the end of your tribe, you had to forage long distances for food, physical strength was very important. It was an important criteria.
Yeah.
And that men had. So they were considered superior. They considered themselves superior. Ever since then, they have used patriarchy. They have used their superiority to express patriarchy and their superiority in other ways. So they have created systems literally made by man-made systems that make patriarchy a self-fulfilling prophecy. For instance, dowry को देख लो. अब तुम्हारे patriarchy ने बोल दिया है कि dowry is necessary because women don't earn. But why don't they earn? पढ़ाया किसने नहीं? आपकी family ने नहीं पढ़ाया. So obviously they won't earn and they'll be a boja.
But of course.
So if you think of the circularity, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. But is 21st century knowledge economy में physical strength का क्या लेना देना? कुछ भी तो नहीं. So patriarchy has run its course.
Yeah.
It has no reason to exist.
Yeah.
But it does exist because men want to continue to have the power. Now, the other thing is, people imagine that feminism is a battle between women and men. It's not. It's a battle of ideologies between those who believe in human rights for all genders and those who believe in patriarchy, which gives men superiority.
Yeah.
So it is a battle of ideologies, and just as all men are not patriarchal, all women are not feminists. So it has nothing to do with your gender. It has to do with your belief in equal rights. So that's a bit of a crash course on feminism and patriarchy and why it is important to be a feminist. Because today, I don't know whether you're going to allow the language that I'm going to use, but I think that not being a feminist is an unconscionable stand. You're either an idiot who doesn't see the historic privileges that the male gender has received, or you're an asshole who doesn't want those privileges to go to somebody else, or you're both. You think that मैं idiot हूँ, मैंने देखे भी नहीं, and I wanted to say the same. And I've met people like that, जिस तरह से दुनिया बनाई गई थी उसे उस तरह से रहने दो. But why? That means that all genders, half the population is not experiencing the same rights as men. And that's not a fair world. So feminism is actually on the way to creating a fair world, on the way to creating human rights for all. So that's patriarchy.
And number two, the penis privilege that you have written about in the book.
So part of patriarchy is the idea that men are not shy of their genitals. And you can see this when, I don't know whether this happens in Pakistan.
I know what you're about to talk about. It happens very frequently in Pakistan.
Okay, where men can khulla pee anywhere.
Yes.
Anywhere. Okay, just unzip your trousers and you can pee on the street. Whereas women's genitalia is supposed to be protected and hidden. Now this, I mean, in most countries, exposing your penis in public is a sexual crime. But we seem to have normalized it. We see it as normal that this is what men do. And that's got to stop. Men and women grow up with a very different relation with their bodies.
Yeah.
And that promotes them to believe that, you know, gang rape, sabke samne gang rape karun kisi ka, to sharam to, I mean, this was my big thing, that when this boy who gang raped somebody, I'd interviewed him, and he had gang raped, and I remember thinking, you know, sharam nahi aati hai in logon ko sabke samne karte hue. Like most of us are like, you know, if I'm going to have sex, I'm going to close the door and no one should see me. And then I realized this is just a consequence of the way men are taught to treat their genitalia.
Yeah.
And so is rape. It's a cause and a consequence of this whole gender dynamic where men's sexuality and sexual organs are seen as conquering.
Yeah.
And women are seen as protecting and needing protection.
Yeah.
And shy and all of these things. So it's part of gender construction that comes from patriarchy.
Another very interesting thing, Tara, that you have mentioned, which is quite amusing for me, is the influence that Bollywood has had on people who commit rape. The sort of heroism that is promoted or projected in Bollywood movies, they tend to internalize it, and then they tend to unleash themselves on these women. So can you talk a bit about that as well? How is Bollywood influencing these people?
See, first of all, I want to talk about, you know, people say ki art reflects life. तो ये life में हो रहा है तो Bollywood में तो होगा ही. But life also reflects art, no?
Yeah.
And art then becomes frozen in time. So one of the guys that I had interviewed was very convinced that he was going to murder his girlfriend, his ex-girlfriend, who he had raped. Then she got him beaten up and she took him to the cops and she's disappeared. And he's like, I mean, I spent 5 days, 6 days with him. And he kept saying to me, you know, मैं उसका murder करूँगा, मैं जैसे lambs कटते हैं ना ईद की तरह, मैं उसको बकरी की तरह मार डालूँगा, मैं gun से मारूँगा. He just went on and on. And his favorite soundtrack was मार दिया जाए कि छोड़ दिया जाए, बोलो तेरे साथ क्या कसूर किया जाए, from the 70s. So what happens is when you have art, it becomes frozen in time. So even if the world is going ahead, now we'll talk about current movies, but even if the world is going ahead, you can still allude to Nana karte pyar tumhi se kar baithe. Yeah, you can still allude to akele kahan ja rahe ho. And you can still think that your actions are right. Now Bollywood, and okay, those are old examples I'm giving you, but even in 2013, there's a Ileana D'Cruz and Shahid Kapoor song saying, you know, what? Tera picha karu to rokne ka nahi, tuj pe hai right mera. And that's 2013. That still happens. Kabir Singh was the most most
highly
watched.
grossing movie of last year.
Yeah, so what has changed? Nothing has changed. So I'm talking about the past, but even now. Anyway, but what happens is Bollywood plays a big role in culture. And it sets the tone for what people see as a man and what people see as a woman and her role and their interpersonal relationship. So a man must always chase, a woman must always be, be coy and play hard to get. A man must always be dabang and, he'll fight and this and that, anger and rage. And a woman will always, be married and sabhyata and saris and all of that nonsense. So these are the gender paradigms that are set. Okay, and then you have what they consider a relationship. छेड़ना, eve teasing करना. ये eve teasing word तो मुझे बिल्कुल ही अच्छा नहीं लगता. But what is eve teasing? Eve teasing is stalking. What is a normal? But the thing is, it's not only men. It's also the women. We also want jealous boyfriends, no? Because we are being taught that possession is part of the love game.
Yeah.
वो थोड़ा प्यार, गुस्सा करना और मारना प्यार की निशानियां है. Bullshit. Like, where are you learning this stuff? So all of these old patterns of behavior, if I talk about man-made systems that promote patriarchy, then this is also one other art form, which is a man-made art form that does promote patriarchy. So I have a huge problem with this, and I don't know the solution though, because I don't think that curbing freedom of speech is a good idea. So I don't know the solution. Maybe the solution is economic. Maybe the more of us who choose not to pay to watch a Kabir Singh, maybe in some generations a Kabir Singh will stop being made. So I don't know what the answer is, but the problem is definitely promoted by Bollywood.
What do you think is the role of education? Because I personally think, because that's my personal mission with this channel as well. मैंने आपको बताया भी था कि जो मेरा चैनल है बुक बडी, आपको पीछे किताबें नजर भी आ रही होंगी, कि ये मेरा मकसद ये है कि मैं अपनी कौम को किताब बीनी पे, they should learn, they should read, and they should progress, and then they should self-actualize themselves and then move towards self-transcendence and give it back to the society. तो मुझे लगता है, देखें, इंडिया में पॉलिटिकल ट्रबल्स हैं, पाकिस्तान में भी पॉलिटिकल ट्रबल्स हैं, करप्शन आपके पास भी है, करप्शन हमारे पास भी है, we almost share a similar set of problems.
We're the same.
मुझे लगता है कि I think कहीं ना कहीं अगर हम लोग चेंज कर सकते हैं वो ये है कि दोनों कौमों को कोई ना कोई, for instance, someone like Tara can get people confident and courageous and educated. Someone like myself can be a catalyst of change for the people in Pakistan कि यार किताबें पढ़ना शुरू करो, थोड़ा अपना horizon को broad करो, अपना vision को broad करो. So what do you think for these rapists, for the people who commit rape, what's the role of education? क्या ये directly proportional है कि जितना इंसान ज़्यादा educate होता है, perhaps his propensity to rape is lessened somewhat? या आपके ख्याल में इसका education से कोई direct ताल्लुक नहीं है? It has no connection, and वो चाहे आप PhD किए हुआ हो तब भी आप कर सकते हो, जिसके cases हैं of course, या फिर आप बिल्कुल ही जिसको पाकिस्तान में कहते हैं चिट्टा अनपढ़ हो तो आप फिर भी आप rape commit कर सकते हो. So what's your understanding of the role of education in the entire thing?
So, we, as Me Too has taught us that, and the fact that one of my subjects was a journalist, one of them was a famous spinal surgeon, is still a famous spinal surgeon. We know that education is not really going to, education in a traditional sense, degrees, is not really going to change your propensity to commit rape. In fact, the more educated, and assuming that education comes with a change of social strata as well, because it's one of the paradigms that I have listed as what I consider social class in India, and then of course in Pakistan. If we look at education as a change, as one of the factors that changes social strata, we know that men of a higher social strata, if they do choose to be perpetrators, as Me Too has explained to us, they're the most dangerous because they have, the ability to smooth talk. They are trusted. They have, if crime is seen as a confluence of means and motive and opportunity, they have opportunity. They have the means. They have the money. They have the lawyers. They have all of this. So I don't know, when you say education, and also this is a question that I think about a lot because I see the political discourse in India.
Yeah.
And I look at it where, the Modi government has made us these raving like bigots. We are against we're against, and a lot of his crowd are educated people. So, I mean, it's the educated middle class. I was disgusted to find this. And in 2014 May, when he came into power, it was okay to say, okay, some people got fooled because he said, economic progress. But in 2019, the agenda was clearly Hindutva. You can't pretend that you didn't know that. And his base is the educated middle class. There are a lot of Hindus in the US who are supporting Modi. So, and they've gone there with their educations and their IIT degrees. So, I don't know whether education is the answer. I think it has more to do with being what you study. And honestly, you can study a lot, but if you don't align it to liberal cultural values, if you don't align it to the idea that, okay, human rights for all, if you don't open your mind to that idea and you don't align what you're reading and studying and all, even if you analyze Modi or you follow Modi for his to watch him or to analyze him or to criticize him, if you don't align all the things that you do towards the goals of transcendence and actualization, then it doesn't matter how educated you are.
Yeah.
It really doesn't. So even if you want to read Mein Kampf, even if you want to read, Hitler, and even if you want to read all of these things, do you want to read it because you want to align to it and take examples from it? Or do you want to study, as we were talking about your PhD study, when you were talking about what you're studying, for me, I was instantly thinking of socialist applications of changing the world. And we were talking about this.
Yeah.
But there are people who are going to be like, oh, okay, I can use that to make a fool of the masses as well. So, I don't know whether you want to reveal what you're studying for your PhD, but
why not?
I'm going to leave the floor to you, but I just think that it depends entirely on where your mind is. And then if I decide that I want to make a better world, I will constantly read to improve, to get towards that idea. But if I don't, and if I am Machiavellian, okay, cancel that word. If I'm trying to make a fool, if I'm trying to become Modi, I will just use all my education will align to prove me right. I will get confirmation bias. I will take ideas and apply them the way I want to. Yeah. So I think it is more about your agenda and your heart, and then the mind comes into play.
True, agreed.
And education and everything else.
Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned, which seems to be common amongst all the rapists, is the role of pornography. All 9 of them used to watch pornographic stuff online. And so there are 2 schools of thought in it, and that you have written that in the book as well, कि अगर आपने pornography देख ली, उसके बाद you don't feel the need to go out and hunt. while another school of thought which says that pornography further stimulates you, persuades you to go out there and commit and replicate what he has seen online. So what do you think? How does pornography play a role?
To be honest, and I've said this in the book, my master's dissertation was on the positives of pornography.
Okay. That's
because I
do forward with that. I would love to read. I would love to go through that. In fact, perhaps
I will send you that. I will send you that. But that was when we were talking about a little bit of it. Okay? When you talk about, I mean, a little bit as in a few magazines and, just like you hide them. But when you talk about porn being the dominant discourse, when it's everywhere, all the time, underage boys seeing it, thinking that that is normal sex, right? Or हमारे cultures में sex ed तो है नहीं. So this is their idea of what sex looks like, of what female compliance looks like. This is the only relationship or the only understanding they have of how to have sex and how to commit, to have romance and consent. And without any sort of, with this much porn and no sex education, it's normalizing the abnormal. But now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
It's all the time. It's hypersexualization of children with no control. And I think porn is one of the reasons I think sexual violence is going to increase. Unless we can't stop porn. I don't know whether we can legislate it, but at least we need sex education to make people know that वो rape videos जो वो देख रहे हैं वो sex नहीं होता, वो love नहीं है.
Yes.
That's not normal. So I mean, I do think that I have evolved to believe that porn is in its current avatar, in its current volume, is very dangerous for society.
Yeah. Another thing that you have mentioned is the objectification of women, of course, by, like you said, Bollywood and media. In fact, अभी मैंने अपना research paper जो final thesis है, वो भी मेरा topic यही है कि sexual objectification of women in advertisements and the psychological and its impact on the psychological well-being of women. तो मेरी जो initial findings हैं, they are very disturbing क्योंकि उनको depression है इसकी वजह से. They want to have picture perfect. They want to relate to the Instagrammers जिनकी बिल्कुल fair skin है, लंबे बाल हैं, beautiful lips, beautiful eyes, and they want to replicate that. So जो ख़वातीन को, the women, the way they are objectified in our culture, like you said, कि ये मेरी possession है, ये जैसे कि मेरा मोबाइल है, ये मेरा है, right? So ये जो खातून है, इसकी अपनी कोई identity नहीं है, इसका अपना कोई जिंदगी का purpose नहीं है, ये मेरी है और whatever I want to do with this lady, I will do that. So is objectification, what do you think? There is some way we can address this objectification because mass media में भी यही है, social media के ऊपर भी यही है और वही फिर हमारी society में भी आ रहा है. So do you think is there a way we can somehow make this work?
I think when we talk about social media and mass media, I think it's very, very important to have countercultures and stronger countercultures. So in my little echo chamber on Facebook and on Instagram, I only follow like feminist influencers, and I am only followed by people who see me as a feminist influencer. So when I was speaking against Kangana Ranaut, and when I was speaking in favor of Ria, my sister-in-law, she writes me this little, she writes on my little Instagram, she's like, I am very surprised, I'm very disappointed that no one has threatened to unfollow you for your post. And I'm like, that's because the only people following me are already liberal.
Yeah.
So, I think counter cultures are very important. Are they either already liberal or they're on their way or want to learn to be in this space? They'll discuss it, but I don't usually get a lot of like, go to Pakistan, Sorry. I don't get a lot of that, at least.
By the way, you will be welcomed in Pakistan. If ever you decide to come, you will be your more than...
I would love to. My family is from there. I would love to see it. But Twitter is a different story. On Twitter, I get trolled a lot because Twitter is a jungle and it's full of snakes, and I don't go to Twitter. But on Twitter, there's a lot of you know, you hate men and you hate India and all of that. Jo main sunti nahi hu. But coming back to your question, I think that when we talk about when we talk about the objectification of women, I think countercultures are very important. And frankly, now, because after the Delhi gang rape, there was a lot of talk about women empowerment. So a lot of mainstream brands have started now, you know, Women's Day ke liye, you know, they have, just say, there was a washing detergent ka ad.
Okay.
That was about men also doing the housework, like also washing. And it said the hashtag was share the load. Now, a lot of feminists were like, "Arey, the brands are appropriating our stories and they are, you know, now just because women empowerment since the Delhi gang rape has become a catchphrase, they are also just marketing and capitalizing on it." But I'm like, at least this conversation is going mainstream. There is a pushback.
Yeah.
You know, and in a certain zamana, you would only see a woman doing the laundry. At least now they are saying that men should do the laundry. So we should not underestimate the power of our countercultures and of our Instagram and Facebook speeches. And also, we should not always just cede the space or the online space to the trolls and to the right wing, because we are a minority. But if we push, we will also normalize this conversation.
Yeah, true.
You know, so yeah.
Okay, so Tara, one last question: that what is the most strangest or the most weird comment that you have got with respect to your book, if any you remember, from a male chauvinist or someone who doesn't,
You know,
someone like this, the CCPO Lahore police chief spoke about someone on those lines. तो क्या आपको सबसे जो अजीबो गरीब ऐसा कमेंट जो आपके ज़हन में रह गया हो या आपने कहीं पे नोट डाउन किया हो?
I actually wrote this down because I found it so amusing. So the trolls come for me, right? When they come for me, they have two problems with me. One is that I'm speaking against men. But I'm like, look, my point is that I want to make genders other than male also rape. But my point, and you're welcome to deal with that. I am dealing with the majority problem, which is that men rape women and other genders and it ruins the gender culture. But also that if you want to write a book about women raping men, please, you go ahead and do it. This is what I'm doing. But the other problem that they have is कि तुम भारत को criticize कर रही हो. And the funny thing is, and I'm sure you get this as well, that you're, you know, naam kharab kar rahe ho, you know.
Yeah.
And my whole idea is that I actually see my book as very, very patriotic. Because I am actually trying to in order to solve a problem, you have to understand it. So I'm actually trying to solve a problem that impacts half of the citizens of this country, half of the citizens of the world. So I see it as patriotic. I see it as a positive thing. And in order to solve you have to understand it. And the problem does lie with the men. So I'm going to talk about men who rape. But I have found recently, and it's just an analysis that I have been conducting, that there is a great overlap between the misogynists and the men's rights activists and the hyper-nationalists. You know, ki Bharat meri shaan, I believe in Modi, anti-Pakistan. And I think I I'm not sure what the answer is, but maybe it is an overlap of toxic, as they say, toxic masculinity. Ki, you know, hyper nationalism, which is related to Purush and soldier and all of that, and patriarchy, which is related to, again, an idea of the man and the man's role in the world.
Yeah.
And I see this overlap because you have to say this. This is one of the tweets I received. जिस भारत की शान की रक्षा आदमी अपने प्राण देकर करता है, वहां हैशटैग मेंस लाइव्स मैटर नहीं करती है कुतिया हैशटैग फेमिनिस्ट माफिया को भारत में कुछ भी करने की आजादी है. इस हैशटैग क्राइम बाय भारत की नारी को भारत के लोग हैशटैग वुमेन्स एम्पावरमेंट कहते हैं. हैशटैग हेल्प मी माई नेशन भारत के पुरुषों को हैशटैग जेंडर ब्लाइंड लॉ से बचाओ. तो मतलब सारी इश्यूज को घुमा फिरा के इट इज अबाउट अ कॉम्बिनेशन ऑफ नेशनलिज्म and men's rights, I mean men's rights as versus women's rights, and this is a patent thing that I deal with.
I think Tara, you're absolutely right. You cannot treat cancer with disprin. So what you're trying to do is, that's what the people actually, मैं पता है तारा, ये mental exposure, ये mental maturity, जब तक वही ना, अगेन आई वांट टू रीइटरेट दिस, कि आप अपना थोड़ा विजन ब्रॉड करेंगे, यू वांट टू इंक्रीज योर एक्सपोजर सो दैट यू अंडरस्टैंड दैट व्हाट दिस लेडी इज ट्राइंग टू डू इज ट्राई टू निप इट इन द बड. कि जो प्रॉब्लम है, जब तक आपको प्रॉब्लम आइडेंटिफाई नहीं होगा, आप उसका सोल्यूशन कैसे निकालोगे? सो आई थिंक तारा, यू आर गोइंग द राइट वे. In the last, you want to have any message for the people in Pakistan, for the women in Pakistan?
Thanks, Shahrukh. I am very grateful that you reached out to me. I think the role of we are the same country, and the role of this toxic masculinity and hyper nationalism to divide us has worked. They have worked, because in my conversations with you, I realized we're the same country. We have the same problems.
Yeah.
So I think that despite the politics, we should unite. We should talk about and find solutions to our common problems. I also think, and I need to say this, and you as an educator, and as a male, I think the role of male allies in this movement is very important, because women are fighting our battles against patriarchy. But when a man stands up and says, I'm a feminist, because he identifies the historic wrongs and wants to change them, and because he believes in equal rights, it is a very powerful moment. So I want the women to rise, of course, and I think that's very important, and we are rising and all of these things. But I also want the men to rise with us.
Yeah, that's a good thought.
Not only for the women in your life, but also patriarchy impacts you as well.
Yeah.
You have to also allow yourselves to be human. And patriarchy puts you in boxes as much as it puts women in boxes. It doesn't allow you to love or show expressions other than anger. Maybe you're not the violent kind, but that's all that is expected of you.
Yeah.
So I want the men to rise, and women, of course. I want the men to rise. And thank you so much, Shahrukh, for having me. It's been an incredible conversation.
You're most welcome. And hopefully we'll have, when your next book is out, we'll have another chat. And if something comes up in the middle, of course, we can have a conversation on that as well. Thank you so much, Tara, for being with me today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.
So दोस्तों, आई होप आपको हमारा डिस्कशन एंगेजिंग और फ्रूटफुल लगा होगा. मुझे अपना फीडबैक जरूर दीजिएगा कमेंट सेक्शन में. अंटिल नेक्स्ट टाइम दोस्तों, लेट्स रीड, लर्न, प्रोग्रेस एंड सेल्फ एक्चुअलाइज. लेट्स रीड पाकिस्तान.